photo shows slave children playing, but what was on the ground caught experts' attention during his 15 years at the Library of Congress. Dr. Michael Torres had digitized thousands of historical photographs, but few stopped him cold like this one. The 1854 daguerreotype showed 5 black children playing in the dirty yard of an Ashford plantation in Georgia. Their faces blurred, bodies frozen by the long exposure time that early photography required. Music, the image came with papers claiming it showed the contentment and happiness of our Negro children who spend their days in carefree play. It was typical pro-slavery propaganda from the 1850s designed to counter abolitionist criticism by showing enslaved people, especially children, as happy and well-treated. Michael had seen hundreds of such photographs. They always unsettled him, knowing the lies they told and the reality they hid. But something about this one felt different. Perhaps the children's expressions or how their bodies were positioned, or the strange quality of the ground beneath them. He loaded the high-resolution scan into imaging software for archival documentation. Standard procedure required examining every inch for damage or details needing preservation. He started with faces, ages ranging from 5 to 10. Then clothing, the simple cotton garments typical of enslaved children. Then he focused on the ground, bare dirt packed hard by foot traffic, music, with struggling patches of grass in Georgia red clay. As Michael increased magnification on the area around the children's hands and feet, his breath caught. Objects littered the dirt, partially buried, half obscured by the limits of 1854 photography, but unmistakably present. Small metal bands, chain links, carved wooden shapes, crude toys perhaps, or something darker. Michael leaned back, heart racing. He zoomed further, adjusting contrast and brightness using digital enhancement to reveal details invisible to the naked eye. In the original photograph, the metal bands were shackles, child-sized shackles, small enough for thin wrists, music, and ankles. The chains the children were literally playing with chains, using them like jump ropes draped across arms like bracelets. The wooden objects were toys carved from something horrible, punishment posts, broken tools, the very materials of their enslavement. With trembling hands, Cale grabbed his phone. Dr. Jennifer Washington, director of the American Memory Project, Music, needed to see this immediately. This wasn't just propaganda. This documented something far more disturbing. Jennifer Washington arrived within 20 minutes, bringing Dr. Raymond Foster, a historian specializing in childhood slavery. They crowded around Michael's monitor, examining the enhanced images he'd prepared. "I've magnified each visible object," Michael explained, displaying close-ups. "At least a dozen items within 3 feet of the children. All appear to be restraint instruments or objects repurposed from plantation punishment equipment." Raymond leaned closer, his expression darkening. "That's a wrist shackle," he said, pointing to a small iron band near the leftmost child's foot. "Look at the size, designed for maybe a 6 or 7-year-old. Jennifer examined another image. "This chain, the center girl is holding it like a jump rope. You can see both hands gripping it, curved as if Music was mid-swing when told to freeze for the exposure. Look at this wooden figure," Michael said, zooming further. "It's carved to look like a doll, but the wood is wrong. Too dark. Too weathered. Music and metal fragments are embedded in it. Nails, maybe, or iron pieces." Raymond's face paled. "That's from a whipping post. The discoloration is bloodstains soaked into the wood over years. Someone, probably one of these children, carved a toy from the post where enslaved people were punished." Silence filled the room. Jennifer paced to the window overlooking the National Mall. "We need full context. Who took this? Why? And did the photographer know what these children were playing with?" Michael pulled up documentation. Charles Whitfield, a Savannah professional photographer specializing in plantation portraiture, hired by owners to create images for northern newspapers and abolitionist meetings as evidence that slavery was humane. "So, this was propaganda," Raymond said. Whitfield was paid to show happy, well-treated enslaved people, but he either didn't notice what surrounded these children or didn't care. Jennifer finished, because to him and those who commissioned this, the objects were invisible, just debris. They literally couldn't see the horror because they refused to acknowledge these children as fully human. Music, Raymond began taking notes. I need Ashford Plantation records. Music, if these restraints were child-sized, there should be documentation, purchase orders, blacksmith invoices, maybe punishment logs. Those logs exist? Michael asked, horrified. Sometimes, Raymond said grimly. Not all plantations kept them, but some did. Meticulous records of every punishment, including to children. The first box contained plantation ledgers from 1850 to 1860. Within an hour, Raymond found what he needed. A Charleston blacksmith invoice dated March 1, 1852. Restraints juvenile size, quantity 6 sets, total cost $142. Music, juvenile size 6 sets, $142. A significant expense in 1852, equivalent to roughly $1,500 today. Someone had paid substantial money for custom-made child restraints. The second box held punishment logs exactly as horrific as feared. Meticulous records of every whipping, confinement, every punitive measure administered to enslaved people at Ashford, including children. Entries were clinical, emotionless. March 15, 1853. Girl, age 7, named Patience, 10 lashes for dropping pottery. June 3, 1853. Boy, age 9, named Samuel, confined in shackles 24 hours for attempting to learn read. Jiang. Raymond's hands shook as he photographed each page. The logs confirmed children as young as 5 faced physical punishment for offenses, music, that were simply normal childhood behavior, dropping things, playing during work time, showing curiosity. Then he found an entry that made his blood run cold. August 12, 1854. Photographer Whitfield arrived from Savannah. Music, children prepared for portrait. Restraints removed for photography. Session duration 2 hours. Play activity supervised in yard. Restraints reapplied following session. The date matched exactly August 12, 1854. The children had been temporarily released from restraint specifically for the photography session. Brief freedom designed to create the illusion of carefree childhood for northern audiences. But the entry confirmed something else. Restraints were routine, not exceptional punishment. Standard practice for controlling enslaved children at Ashford. Raymond continued through the records, building a comprehensive picture. Enslaved children worked from age 5 or 6. Initially light tasks, graduating quickly to demanding labor, minimal food, no education, harsh punishment for any perceived disobedience. In a separate ledger, he found a birth registry listing enslaved children born in the relevant years. Cross-referencing ages and punishment logs, Raymond identified the 5 photographed children. Sarah, age 10, Thomas, age 8, Patience, age 7, Samuel, age 6, Little Grace, age 5. Finding descendants of enslaved people requires patience, creativity, music, and access to fragmentary records. Raymond Foster partnered with Dr. Angela Morris, a genealogist specializing in African American family history, music, to trace the lines of the 5 photographed children. They started with post-emancipation records, the 1870 census, the first to list formerly enslaved people by full names. In Burke County, Georgia, where Ashford Plantation had been located, they found several families with the surname Ashford. Among them, Sarah Ashford, age 26, living with her husband Robert and 3 children. The age matched perfectly. She'd been 10 in 1854 and 26, music, in 1870. That's her, Angela said, pulling up the census record. Sarah from the photograph. She survived the war, married, had children. Now we trace forward. The trail led through marriage records, death certificates, property deeds. Sarah lived until 1930, dying at age 59 in Atlanta. After 2 weeks of intensive research, Angela found a living descendant, Dr. Lorraine Hayes, a retired Philadelphia educator, great, music, granddaughter of the Sarah in the photograph. Raymond called her on a Tuesday evening, nervous about explaining his discovery. Dr. Hayes answered on the second ring, her voice warm but cautious, when Raymond identified himself as a historian researching Ashford Plantation. My grandmother told stories about that place, Dr. Hayes said. Nothing music. Good. What have you found? Raymond explained the photograph. the objects in the dirt, music, the plantation records documenting brutal treatment of enslaved children. He sent enhanced images as they spoke. The line went silent. Then, "That's music, my great-great-grandmother, that little girl holding the chain." "We believe so, yes." Sarah, age 10 in 1854, the oldest child in the photograph. "She's playing with a chain," Dr. Hayes said, her voice thick with emotion. "Like it's a toy, like it's a jump rope." "Records indicate she'd been restrained with those chains earlier that same day," Raymond said gently. "Remove, indeed temporarily for the photograph, then reapplied afterward. We think she and the other children played with objects that had been used to punish and control them because those were the only objects available." "Doctor, music." Hayes was crying now. "My grandmother used to tell a story about how her grandmother Sarah would never let the family children play with anything metal, music. No toy soldiers, no tin cups, nothing. She said metal was trouble. We thought she was just superstitious, music, but this explains it." While Raymond traced descendants, Michael Torres and Jennifer Washington investigated Charles Whitfield, the photographer. What they discovered complicated the narrative unexpectedly. Whitfield had been a successful Savannah photographer, operating a studio from 1848 until his death in 1872. His client list included wealthy plantation owners, merchants, politicians. He was known for flattering portraits, and increasingly in the 1850s, propaganda images designed to counter abolitionist criticism. But Michael found something unexpected in Whitfield's music, personal papers at the Savannah Historical Society, a private journal kept from 1850 to 1865, entries with, here sporadic, often months between updates, but revealed a deeply conflicted man. A July 1854 entry just before photographing the Ashford children read, "I am hired to create lies with my camera. Plantation owners want images of smiling slaves, well-fed children, orderly fields. They want proof their peculiar institution is humane and just. But what I see through my lens tells a different story. I see people in chains, children who should be playing but instead labor, families torn apart at auction blocks. Yet I take their money and create the demanded images. Because I have a family to feed and a business to maintain. I am complicit in evil, and I, music, know it." Michael shared this with Jennifer, who read it with growing surprise. He knew he was creating propaganda, felt guilty but kept doing it. "There's more," Michael said, pulling up another entry dated August 1854, the exact month of the Ashford photographs. "Today I photographed children at the Ashford place. The overseer arranged them music in the yard, told them to play naturally, as if such a thing were possible. I saw what surrounded them. Shackles, chains, whipping post pieces carved into crude toys. Children, literally playing with bondage instruments. I framed the shot to include these objects, knowing Ashford wouldn't see them, knowing Northern critics wouldn't look closely enough, but they are there in the image, preserved forever. Perhaps someday someone will see what I saw. Perhaps someday this photograph will testify to the truth rather than the lie it was commissioned to tell." Jennifer sat back, stunned. He did it deliberately, knew the objects were there, made sure they were visible. This wasn't accidental documentation, it was intentional subversion. They found more entries describing similar subtle rebellion. Whitfield photographed enslaved people with visible whipping scars, captured expressions of deep sadness in supposedly happy portraits, deliberately framed shots to include evidence of poor living conditions. He created paid-for propaganda while embedding truth for anyone looking closely enough. But he never spoke out publicly. To fully understand what the children had been playing with, Jennifer Washington brought in Dr. Patricia Chen, a forensic archaeologist specializing in slavery-era artifacts. Patricia examined the enhanced images with a practiced eye. These objects are consistent with restraint devices used throughout the South in the mid-19th century. She confirmed the wrist shackles were manufactured in northern factories, ironically, and sold to southern plantations. The chain links appear to be the standard configuration for leg irons. She pointed to the carved wooden figures. These are more unusual. Enslaved people, including children, created toys and tools from whatever materials were available. wood from punishment posts, broken tool handles, even auction block pieces. There's an archaeological term, adaptive reuse, but that clinical language doesn't capture what it really means. People taking dehumanizing objects and transforming them into objects of daily life, even play. Jennifer arranged for Patricia to visit museum collections holding slavery-era artifacts. They examined actual restraints used on enslaved children, some as small as those visible in the Ashford photograph. Child restraints were common. Plantation owners claimed they were necessary to prevent children from running away or causing mischief. But the reality was, they were tools of psychological control. A child growing up in shackles learns that father itself is impossible. Within a month, Patricia organized a small archaeological excavation at the former Ashford plantation site. The results were vindicating and heartbreaking. They found 2 child-sized iron shackles, corroded but intact chain sections matching the types in the photograph, carved wood fragments, metal fragments from locks and restraint mechanisms, and most, music, poignantly, a small wooden top, a child's toy carved with initials SA. The Library of Congress held a press conference on a cold February morning, 6 months after Michael Torres first noticed the photograph. The main reading room was packed with journalists, music, historians, descendants, and members of the public. Jennifer Washington stood at a podium, the 1854 photograph projected on a massive screen behind her. At standard view, it showed what it had always shown: 5 children playing in a dirty yard, apparently carefree and happy. For 170 years, Jennifer began, this photograph has existed in archives as pro-slavery propaganda, an image created to convince Northern audiences that enslaved children were well treated and content. But when we examined this image with modern technology, we discovered something that transforms our understanding entirely. The image zoomed in, focusing on the ground around the children. The objects became visible: shackles, chains, carved wooden toys from punishment posts. The room fell silent. These children, Jennifer continued, were not playing music with toys. They were playing with instruments of enslavement, with shackles removed from their wrists and ankles just hours before, with chains that would be locked onto them again as soon as the photographer left, with carved figures made from wooden posts where they and their families were whipped. She introduced Dr. Hayes and the other descendants who stood together before the assembled press. Dr. Hayes spoke, her voice steady despite her emotion. My great-great-grandmother Sarah was 10 years old when this photograph was taken. According to plantation records, she'd been whipped 3 times that year for minor offenses. She lived in constant fear and pain. When the photographer came, she was told to play, to smile, to prove slavery was kind, so she picked up a chain, the same chain that had restrained her, and held it where the camera could see. She bore witness, music, the only way she could. Raymond presented the archaeological evidence, photographs of the excavated shackles, chains, wooden top with Sarah's initials. This photograph is not just an image, he said. It's a crime scene. It documents child abuse, psychological torture, systematic dehumanization, and it was created intentionally as propaganda to justify these crimes. The press conference lasted 3 hours. Multiple journalists asked about photographer Whitfield and his stated intentions. Jennifer addressed this directly. Whitfield wrote in his journal that he deliberately framed the shot to include the objects as a form of hidden truth. Some might see this as moral complexity or even courage. Music, but I want to be clear. Whitfield profited from slavery. The Ashford photograph discovery prompted researchers nationwide to re-examine other slavery images with similar skepticism. The results were disturbing and revolutionary. In photograph after photograph marketed as showing contented slaves or well-treated servants, researchers found evidence of abuse, restraint, music, and suffering hidden in plain sight. These photographs were designed to lie, Jennifer explained at a symposium. But if you look closely enough, the truth is always there. The photographers either didn't notice or didn't care that evidence of abuse was visible in their carefully composed propaganda images. Dr. Raymond Foster expanded his research beyond Ashford Plantation. Child restraint was not exceptional, he reported. It was standard practice. Children as young as 4 or 5 were subjected to shackles, chains, and confinement as forms of control and punishment. And yes, there is documentation of children playing with these restraint devices, music, either because they had no other toys or because transforming instruments of oppression into playthings was a psychological survival mechanism. Patricia Chen's archaeological team began excavations at several other former plantation sites. At each site, they found similar evidence. But the research also revealed something hopeful: resistance. In many of the carved toys and adapted objects, archaeologists found evidence of subtle defiance, initials carved into wooden figures, decorative, music, patterns that might have been coded messages. Small acts of creativity asserting humanity in the face of systematic dehumanization. These children and their families refused to be completely broken, Patricia said. Yes, they were forced to play with chains. Yes, they lived under constant threat of violence, but they also carved toys, told stories, created beauty where they could. The photograph shows both the horror of slavery and the resilience of the people who survived it. Dr. Hayes and other descendants became advocates for this more complex understanding of slavery. Within a year of the photograph's revelation, it had become one of the most widely used primary sources in teaching about American slavery. Educators struggled with responsible presentation. For middle school students, the curriculum became more direct. Teachers showed the standard photograph first, asking students what they saw. Then came the enhanced images showing the objects clearly: shackles, chains, carved toys from punishment posts. The contrast between initial impression and reality became a powerful lesson about how photographs can mislead, how propaganda works, and why critical examination of primary sources matters. High school and college curricula went deeper, incorporating plantation records, Whitfield's Conference, Lichted journal entries, archaeological evidence, and descendant, music, testimonies. Dr. Hayes became a frequent guest speaker in schools. "This is what resistance looks like," she told students. "My great music grandmother survived horrors you can't imagine. She was forced to play with chains as a child, but she grew up, had children, built a life, and here I am, her descendant, a doctor, a free woman. Music, that's the full story." On a humid Georgia morning in August 2025, music, exactly 171 years after the photograph was taken, a memorial was dedicated at the former Ashford Plantation site. The monument consisted of bronze sculptures of the 5 children from the photograph positioned as they had been in Music, 1854, but with one crucial difference. The chains, shackles, and punishment post toys were rendered in bronze as well, impossible to overlook or ignore. More than 300 people attended the ceremony. Jennifer Washington spoke first. For 170 years, this photograph existed as propaganda, an image designed to hide the truth of slavery. But the children in this image refused to let the truth be completely hidden. They held the evidence of their suffering where the camera could see it, trusting that someday someone would look closely enough. Today, we honor that trust by ensuring their testimony, music, is never forgotten. Raymond Foster read the names: Sarah, age 10, Thomas, age 8, Patience, age 7, Samuel, age 6, Grace, age 5. As he spoke each name, a descendant came forward to place flowers at the memorial. Dr. Hayes addressed the crowd, her voice strong despite tears. "My great-great-grandmother Sarah lived to be 59 years old. She survived slavery, music, survived the Civil War, survived Reconstruction. She never spoke about the worst of what she endured. Some trauma is too deep for words, but she left, music, us this photograph. She made sure we would see. Now we do." The memorial included an interactive element, tablets mounted beside the sculptures, showing the original photograph at standard magnification, then allowing visitors to zoom in and discover objects themselves, recreating Michael Torres's original moment of discovery. As the ceremony concluded, Dr. Hayes stood alone before the memorial, looking at the bronze sculpture of Sarah, holding a chain like a jump rope, looking directly at the camera with those determined eyes. "You did music it," Dr. Hayes whispered to her ancestor. "We see you."